Waiter insults Big Shaq, completely unaware. He owns the restaurant. What happens next leaves everyone speechless. The evening was in full swing at Prime Grill, a high-end restaurant known for its sleek decor and exclusive clientele. Waiters moved briskly through the dining room, balancing trays of gourmet dishes, while diners sipped on expensive wine under the soft glow of modern chandeliers. Among the bustle, a tall, broad-shouldered man entered quietly, dressed in a loose polo shirt and jeans, his demeanor casual and unassuming. Shaquille O'Neal, or Big Shaq as the world knew him, wasn't looking for attention tonight. He was here for one reason: to enjoy a meal at his restaurant without the fanfare that usually followed his every move. Despite his towering presence, Shaq hoped his casual attire and baseball cap would allow him to blend in, at least for a little while. Shaq chose a corner table and sat down, smiling politely at a passing waiter. The young man, whose name tag read Connor, barely glanced at him. With a quick once-over, Connor assumed Shaq was just another diner, his casual outfit blending in with the more modestly dressed guests. A few minutes passed before Connor approached Shaq's table, holding a notepad with a forced smile. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone flat, almost dismissive. Shaq smiled warmly, his deep voice polite. "Yeah, I'll have the ribeye steak, medium rare, and a side of mashed potatoes." Connor raised an eyebrow, glancing at Shaq's outfit again. "You sure about the ribeye? It's one of the more premium items on the menu," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "We also have a burger on special. It's more affordable." Shaq's smile faltered slightly, but he kept his composure. "No, I'm good with the ribeye," he said simply, his voice calm. Connor shrugged, scribbling on his notepad. "All right, your call," he muttered before walking off, shaking his head. Nearby diners exchanged glances, some recognizing Shaq and whispering excitedly. A middle-aged couple at a nearby table leaned toward each other, one of them muttering, "Does he not know who that is?" Shaq leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful but calm. He had faced situations like this before, moments when people judged him based on appearance rather than character. He could have revealed his identity then and there, but Shaq decided to wait. Sometimes actions spoke louder than words. As Connor returned with a glass of water, he placed it on the table without a word, avoiding eye contact. Shaq thanked him politely, but Connor barely acknowledged it, turning away to tend to another table. The tension in the air began to grow as more diners noticed the interaction. Whispers grew louder, and curious glances darted toward Shaq. But what Shaq did next would not only change the atmosphere in the restaurant, but leave everyone there completely stunned. Shaq sat patiently, his calm demeanor masking the thoughts running through his mind. He wasn't upset. He had dealt with dismissive attitudes before. But what always mattered to him was how people handled themselves when they realized the truth. Tonight, Connor had a chance to learn a lesson, and Shaq was curious to see how things would unfold. Connor returned a short while later with Shaq's ribeye steak and mashed potatoes. He set the plate down with little care, the edges of the plate clinking against the table. "Here you go," Connor said curtly, not even glancing up as he turned to leave. "Thanks," Shaq said, his deep voice carrying a weight that made Connor pause momentarily before walking away. From across the room, a table of younger diners whispered excitedly. "That's Shaquille O'Neal," one of them said, their voice barely above a whisper. "Why is the waiter acting like that? Does he not recognize him?" The murmurs began to ripple through the restaurant, with more guests now stealing glances at Shaq, their eyes widening as they realized who he was. Even the restaurant manager, a woman named Emily, caught wind of the growing buzz. She stepped out from the kitchen, scanning the room before her gaze landed on Shaq. Her expression shifted from neutral professionalism to wide-eyed recognition. Emily hurried over to Connor, who was chatting idly near the counter. "Connor," she said, her voice low but firm, "do you realize who you've been serving?" Connor frowned, clearly annoyed. "Yeah, some guy in a polo shirt who ordered the ribeye." Emily's eyes narrowed. "That's Shaquille O'Neal. The Shaquille O'Neal. He owns this restaurant." Connor froze, the blood draining from his face. "Wait, what?" he stammered, his voice barely audible. Emily sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. "You've been rude to the owner of the restaurant, Connor, and I'm pretty sure he noticed." Panic set in as Connor glanced toward Shaq's table, where the man was calmly cutting into his steak, seemingly unbothered. I didn't know, Connor muttered. He didn't say anything. Emily shook her head. He doesn't have to. It's not about who he is. It's about how you treat every customer. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Connor grabbed a fresh glass of water and nervously made his way back to Shaq's table. The whispers in the restaurant quieted as the diners watched, sensing that something significant was about to happen. Mr. O'Neill, Connor began, his voice shaky as he set the water down on the table. I, I didn't realize who you were. I'm so sorry if I came off rude earlier. Shaq looked up, his calm gaze meeting Connor's nervous one. No need to apologize for not knowing who I am, he said, his voice steady. But I do think you need to reflect on how you treat people, whether they're wearing a suit or a polo shirt. Connor swallowed hard, his face reddening. You're absolutely right, he said quickly. I didn't mean to come off disrespectful. It won't happen again. Shaq leaned back in his chair, nodding slightly. All right, he said. Apology accepted. But let me ask you something. What would you have done if I wasn't Shaquille O'Neal? Connor blinked, caught off guard by the question. I don't know, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Shaq gave a faint smile, his tone softer now. Think about that, he said, because it matters. The entire room seemed to exhale at once, the weight of Shaq's words settling over everyone. But the night wasn't over. What Shaq did next would transform the entire atmosphere of the restaurant and leave a lasting impression on everyone present. As Connor retreated to the counter, still processing Shaq's words, the restaurant's energy shifted. The whispers of awe and admiration grew louder, and the diners who had witnessed the exchange were now fully captivated. Shaq, still calm and composed, finished his steak, occasionally glancing around the room as if weighing his next move. Emily, the manager, cautiously approached Shaq's table. Mr. O'Neill, she said, her voice professional but tinged with nervousness. I want to personally apologize for any disrespect you experienced tonight. This is not how we train our staff, and I assure you it won't happen again. Shaq looked up, his gaze warm but steady. It's all good, Emily, he said, waving off her concern. Nobody's perfect, and I'm not here to make a scene. But there's a lesson to be learned here. Not just for Connor, but for all of us. Emily nodded quickly, her expression a mix of relief and curiosity. Of course, she said. What do you have in mind? Shaq leaned forward slightly, his deep voice carrying across the quieting restaurant. Let's gather the staff, he said. I want to talk to everyone. Emily blinked, taken aback, but she nodded. Right away, Mr. O'Neill, she said, hurrying off to round up the team. Within minutes, the staff had assembled near Shaq's table, their expressions a mix of curiosity and apprehension. The diners, sensing something important was happening, remained seated, their eyes fixed on the scene. Shaq stood, his towering presence commanding the room. He looked at the staff, then at Connor, who stood nervously at the back of the group. First of all, Shaq began, his voice calm but firm, I want to say thank you. You all work hard to keep this place running, and I see that. Your effort doesn't go unnoticed. A ripple of relief passed through the staff, but Shaq's tone shifted slightly as he continued. That said, he added, it's not just about working hard. It's about how you treat people, every single person who walks through that door. Whether they're wearing a three-piece suit or a hoodie, they deserve respect. Connor looked down, his face reddening, while the rest of the staff nodded solemnly. Shaq turned his attention to Connor directly, his expression softening. Connor, he said, you made a mistake tonight, but the fact that you owned up to it shows that you're willing to learn, and that's what matters. Connor looked up, surprised by Shaq's words. Thank you, Mr. O'Neill, he said quietly. I promise I'll do better. Shaq smiled faintly. I believe you, he said, and I hope tonight is a reminder for everyone here that kindness doesn't cost a thing, but it's worth everything. The room erupted into soft applause, the diners and staff visibly moved by Shaq's words. Emily stepped forward, her voice filled with emotion. Thank you, Mr. O'Neill, she said. Your message means a lot to all of us. Shaq nodded, his smile widening. Now, he said, his tone lightening, how about we make tonight even better? The staff exchanged curious glances as Shaq continued. I'll be covering dinner for everyone here tonight, he said, gesturing toward the diners. And I want every member of the team to get a bonus. Y'all deserve it. The restaurant erupted into cheers, the diners clapping enthusiastically while the staff exchanged astonished smiles. Connor, still standing at the back, couldn't hide his gratitude. For the first time that night, he smiled, a genuine, humble smile. But Shaq wasn't done yet. One more thing, he said, his grin widening. Let's make this a night to remember. Who's got dessert recommendations? The room filled with laughter, the atmosphere now light and celebratory. But what Shaq had done wasn't just about food or money. It was about leaving a mark, a lesson that would resonate far beyond the restaurant's walls. The restaurant buzzed with excitement as Shaq's generosity and words began to sink in. Diners smiled warmly at each other, sharing their admiration for what they had just witnessed. The staff, many of whom had been on edge moments earlier, now looked inspired, their spirits lifted by the unexpected turn of events. Connor, still standing near the back, watched as Shaq casually interacted with the diners, posing for photos, shaking hands, and sharing laughs. The once tense atmosphere had transformed into a celebration of kindness and humility. But Connor knew he had one more thing to do. Summoning his courage, he approached Shaq once more. "Mr. O'Neill," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "I just want to say thank you, not just for your generosity, but for teaching me a lesson I won't forget." Shaq turned to him, his expression calm but thoughtful. "What's the lesson, Connor?" he asked, his deep voice carrying the weight of the moment. Connor hesitated, then said, "That respect shouldn't be based on who you think someone is. Everyone deserves kindness, no matter what." Shaq smiled, nodding approvingly. "That's it," he said. "And the sooner you live by that, the better off you'll be. Not just here, but in life." Connor nodded quickly, his determination clear. "I will," he said. "Thank you again." As Connor stepped back, Shaq turned to the restaurant manager, Emily. "Emily," he said, "you've got a great team here. Let's make sure they feel appreciated, not just tonight, but moving forward." Emily nodded, her admiration for Shaq evident. "Absolutely, Mr. O'Neill. I'll make it a priority." Shaq smiled, his towering presence still radiating warmth. "Good," he said, "because when your people feel valued, they pass that on to everyone who walks through those doors." The night continued with a renewed sense of energy. The diners, moved by Shaq's generosity, left hefty tips for the staff, creating a ripple effect of kindness that extended far beyond the restaurant walls. The staff worked with newfound pride, their interactions with the customers marked by genuine warmth and gratitude. As the evening wound down, Shaq took one final walk through the restaurant, shaking hands with every staff member and offering words of encouragement. When he reached Connor, he gave him a firm handshake and a knowing smile. "You've got potential, kid," Shaq said. "Don't waste it." Connor smiled back, his confidence bolstered. "I won't, sir." As the night came to a close, the restaurant buzzed with a renewed energy that lingered long after the last meal was served. The staff, who had started the evening on edge, now wore smiles that radiated pride and gratitude. The diners slowly trickled out, many stopping to shake hands with Shaq or express their admiration for his actions. Shaq stood by the entrance, taking a moment to greet every departing guest. His easy demeanor and genuine warmth made each interaction feel personal, leaving everyone with a story to tell about the night they met Shaquille O'Neal. When the last guest left, Shaq turned back to Emily and the staff, who had gathered near the counter. "You all did great tonight," he said, his deep voice carrying the sincerity of his words. "This isn't just a restaurant. It's a place where people come to feel good, and you make that happen." The team clapped softly, their admiration for Shaq evident in their faces. Even Connor, who had started the night with a chip on his shoulder, looked like a changed man. He stepped forward hesitantly, holding out his hand. "Mr. O'Neill," Connor said, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "thank you for everything tonight. I'll never forget this." Shaq shook his hand firmly, his smile kind. "You're welcome, Connor," he said. "And remember, every day's a chance to be better than the day before. Don't waste it." Connor nodded, a flicker of determination in his eyes. "I won't." Shaq turned to Emily, his expression thoughtful. "Emily, keep taking care of this place. It's not just a business, it's a community." Emily nodded, her voice soft but resolute. I will, Mr. O'Neill. Thank you for reminding us of that. Shaq gave her a final smile before making his way to the door. As he stepped outside into the cool night air, the staff gathered at the window, watching as he walked toward his car. The towering man who had entered quietly, looking for a simple meal, had left behind a ripple effect that would be felt long after he was gone. Inside the restaurant, the staff began to clean up, but the atmosphere was different. They worked with a renewed sense of purpose, their interactions marked by the respect and kindness Shaq had modeled. For Connor, it was more than just a memorable night. It was a turning point, a lesson in humility and the value of treating every customer with dignity. As Shaq drove away, the lights of the restaurant glowing behind him, he smiled to himself. It wasn't about being recognized or celebrated. It was about making a difference, one person and one moment at a time. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful and uplifting stories. Stay tuned for the next unforgettable tale that will remind us all of the impact of kindness and humility.